what we're gonna do is Nick and I are gonna record separately, like a 30-minute intro and us talking about some other stuff, and then we're gonna say, "Hey, we've got this great interview," and then I'll edit in this what we're gonna do today. Um, how do you want me to refer to you? I mean, Steve, but do you want me to?
Yeah, Steve is fine. Yeah, I don't know. I don't have I don't know. I don't have any product or service to offer, so I don't know if there's I don't, I don't
No,
know.
that's all good, man. We we talk to people that are from different places, right? From breweries or who do this or that or the other thing. We do that for sure because it's, good to get kind of insight and we like to promote people. But we're also just regular dudes, so we also just like to, talk to other people, get your perspective. I
Totally.
think the second interview we ever did was someone I met on Reddit who is from Italy, and he
Nice.
just talked to who's just a regular dude. He's like, yeah, this is how craft beer is in my area of Italy, and it was just a fun thing. So
Yeah, cool.
yeah,
Cool. Yeah, Steve is fine. Yeah, that's how most people refer to me, so
okay.
that
You
works for
want me
me.
to post your home address and your phone number up here? And
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Oh, we'll stay out late to gastrobate and hang out with our friends. We'll share a few good microbrews, the good times never end. From seaside to the mountains, we'll travel many lands. Eateth of their pub cuisine and hear their local bands. We'll drink it from a bottle, in a can, or what's on tap. We'll rate each brew as we do with fairness and a map. Spirits are up, we'll fill our cup, the wind is in our sails. We'll drunkenly mix metaphors and travel hoppy trails.
welcome back to Hoppy Trails, a show where sometimes we didn't record a proper introduction because we were just recording a short interview for the B segment, but we had so much fun that it stretched into a full episode length, and so now we're going to give it to you as a standalone without trying to chop it down and pick the parts we love. I'm Nick. And I'm Travis, and very clearly I'm recording this in the studio by myself without Nick. What do you mean by yourself without Nick? I'm right here. Well, I think everyone can tell just by that voice that this is not actually Nick. It's me just doing a dialogue with myself, pretending to be Nick. What do you mean pretending to be Nick? Of course I'm Nick. I have a long beard and I ride a motorcycle and I live in the Pacific Northwest. Who else would I be? All right, fake Nick, I'm not going to argue with you. You clearly sound like a Muppet, which is only partially how you sound in real life. So instead of arguing with a Muppet, let's just get to the interview. I like beer. Okay. All right. Well, look, we're already rolling, so let's just jump into it. This is an interview that we're going to do. Steve, you and I, we ran into each other on Reddit, as I sometimes talk about. And somebody had posted, I'm just going to give a quick summary. Somebody had posted basically just a title with nothing else, and they said, is craft beer getting boring or am I? And I was just like, oh my God, this is another insufferable, tedious person. And you had a roughly similar roughly similar response to I did. I'm gonna read it here because I thought it was really amazing. And then we'll just talk about craft beer, okay?
Sounds good.
All right, here's what Steve said, and this is amazing. This shit is getting so tedious. Objectively, from the late 80s through the mid 2010s, the United States saw an absolute explosion in terms of beer style beer style access that included a globally historic addition of novel styles that culminated in the introduction of the modern New England IPA, pastry stout, and smoothie sour. Many of us were at the right age to live through that wave and experience that explosion in real time while we were in a naturally curious and exploratory time in our lives. Now, the market for diverse beer styles has largely been met by thousands of small producers and the modern American beer market and culture have reached a level of maturity. And the people who rode that wave up are older and at an age where an intense interest in an alcohol product verges into alcoholism. I feel attacked. Uh, or they have reached an advanced stage of life responsibility that makes chasing beers and breweries every weekend unrealistic and irresponsible. Attacked again. Jeez, shots fired. There is more, better, and more diverse beer available than ever before in American and possibly global history. It's ubiquitous. It's not novel. It's the norm. If you want to nerd out about a particular style, you can still have the thrill of chasing down excellent examples of that style from around the country and the world, but you can also just relax into the beautiful reality that you can obtain good to outstanding examples of all sorts of beers at your local grocers, liquor stores, and breweries. Depends where your interests lie. And I read that and I thought, God damn, that was brilliantly said. Brilliantly
Yes.
said. And so I reached
Thank you,
out and I
thank you.
said, hey, man, you want to be on a podcast? And so that's how we got here. That's why we're here today, right?
That's the story. Yep. You
All
roped me
right.
in with the promise of fame.
Thank you, Reddit.
Yeah. Thank you, Reddit.
That's it. Fame and fortune
Yeah.
not guaranteed. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, we often like to start off by cracking a beer and talking about what we're all about to drink. And this is where we're gonna see if you can if you can really back up all the stuff you said. Let's see what you're drinking today.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I went deep in the esoteric cellar and pulled out a little Summerfest from
Ooh.
Costco.
Nice.
Once again, I was grocery shopping and I said, "Oh, that's a great price for a case of Summerfest." Wow, I can't pass that up.
Excellent.
So, yeah, I've been enjoying that the last week and a half or so, and
Yeah.
Nice.
yeah, so,
Excellent.
yeah, nice to
I-
see them bringing back stuff like that.
I am gonna jump right in with a little limited edition. Okay. I'm down here in the Monterey area. We've got a brewery called Alvarado Street Brewing. They're making some great stuff. They're the the Great Notion of the Central Coast,
Yeah,
right? So they're doing a lot of the Great Notion type stuff. This is a limited edition of one of their, basically flagship beer. Mai Tai is their flagship, right? I
okay.
mean, they're constantly producing. It's the biggest batches that they do, and it's everywhere. This is the gold edition, okay? And what they did with this, it's double dry hopped West Coast IPA, 6.5%. And what they wanted to do with this was they wanted to really make it just really crisp, crystal clear, and have almost no bitterness to it. And I have to say, I was over at the brewery and they were talking about it. And I said, you know what, give me a side by side of the Mai Tai and the gold. And it really is. It's one of those things where you taste it and you're like, yeah, I definitely see it. And then you go back to the original, you're like, oh my God, yeah. When you go backwards, you really notice it with that the bitterness on the back end. Not that Mai Tai is a bitter beer, but when you compare it to this, you definitely notice it. So I'm gonna
For sure.
I'm gonna
Very
give
cool.
this a pour here.
It's a very
what
good
do you
one.
what are you pouring in your glass there, my brother?
I'm rocking from our good friends at Arable Brewing.
Yeah.
Rule of Two,
Yeah.
which is if for those Star Wars fans out there, it's a Czech dark lager. So
Ooh.
this is
Oh, nice.
actually my favorite beer from them. This is their, I believe, second time making it, and it is now offered in cans.
There you
So
go.
Wonderful.
I was stoked about that and had to buy a 4-pack.
Good choice.
All right. Now, I heard something slam right now, and I don't know if that's one of you or if that's me. It's my daughter's bath time, and I hear her stomping around above me right now. So
No, I think that was my wife ducked in here to drop something in the laundry. So it might have been her closing the door.
yeah, we're not one of those professional shows where it just sounds all clean in studio. We're as we said, we're a couple of regular dudes just talking about beer.
Yeah.
Here,
Mhm.
this is. I don't know if I've used this one before. This is a glass from Proper Pints. That
Nice.
fellow that makes those kind of one-off glasses.
Totally.
And,
Excellent.
yeah, so this
Oh,
is
that's from that soccer show, right? It's
Yeah,
a
the
UK.
soccer
Oh
show.
yeah, there it is. Yeah,
what's
Ted
it
Lasso.
called? Yeah, there it
Ted
is.
Lasso.
Ted Lasso. Yeah, I saw the first season and a half of it, and then I didn't have my brother's login anymore, so I couldn't watch the rest of it. Yeah, that's a good one. That's excellent. Okay, so as we were saying when we first jumped on here, we're all roughly in the same age group, right? I mean, if this were, elementary school, junior high, we wouldn't be that close together. But once you get into kind of adulthood and where we are, we're all roughly in the same group here, right? I'm in my
Yeah.
early 40s. Nick, you're in your early 40s. Steve, you were in
Yeah.
your late 30s, yeah?
Yep.
So we kind of watched beer come up together. And now, Steve, are you from the West Coast, or are you just out here now?
No, I grew up in Michigan.
Okay.
So yeah, I moved out here for right after high school. And then,
Okay.
so I've been on the West Coast now for, gosh, almost 20 years, 18 years, something like that.
Okay. So yeah, you were out here when we were really getting things going, when that West Coast style of IPA really kicked off, and
Totally.
those big malty, IBU bombs were coming out, right?
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. I definitely remember I was weaned on the bombers of all that stuff from Marin Brewing and Moylan's, the Moylan's Kilt Lifter and
Oh
the
yes,
Ooh, yeah,
what is it?
Tilt Lifter.
Hopsicle. I think was
yes.
their double IPA, and then all the way up the Eye of the Hawk and Red Tail Bombers and Anderson
Oh,
Valley when they used to have all kinds of crazy their different
nice.
IPAs, and
Yeah.
so that was definitely kind of like the beer that raised me on the
Yeah,
style.
it's Mendocino Brewing. They had all those different lines with a bird logo on each one.
Yep.
And oh man, those have been gone for a long time. But man, I
Yeah.
miss those. Those were
Lost
some of
Coast.
the ones that
Yep. Lost Coast.
I got started on them back when I was, early days. Didn't know much about beer, just label shopping.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. You go in, and I mean, it was the cooler, the bomber cooler was like a candy store. All the new
Oh, yeah.
what's the new cool label, and
Oh yeah,
I still label shop. We all do.
yes you
yeah.
do.
Yeah, I mean, you
Well,
have to.
And it's interesting because you talk about the bomber, and for us, we know exactly what that is. But the kids these days, they don't even know.
One of
they
my fridge
probably
shelves
don't
is
even know
still
the
filled
term.
with bombers.
Yeah, man. Yeah, the bomber, the old 22-ounce bottle. That was the way you got most of the stuff,
The
because
good stuff for sure.
the
Yeah.
good stuff
Yeah.
was, because it wasn't economical for them to do it in cans at that time, and nobody was doing. Well, very few people were doing them in 12-ounce bottles unless they were really mass production. So
Yeah.
that 22-ounce bottle, that bomber, man, that's where it was. That's where you got the good stuff. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. I actually just I was out deep in the woods the other day, and wanted to get a beer, and the only thing they had that was like really not moldy or Bush Light
Ooh.
was a 19.2 ounce cans of Lagunitas IPA.
That's
Yeah.
stovepipe. Nice.
Stovepipe.
The stovepipe, exactly. And still, it was a nice to revisit. But I remember, man, those Lagunitas bombers, those 22-ounce bottles of Hop Stupid and their IPA and all the hairy eyeball, and
Oh yeah.
man, they were.
Oh yeah, man. Oh yeah, and what was the one that had the elephant on the front with the big tusks? Shoot, I can't remember what
Man.
that was, but I used to grab one of those every time. Man, that was a nice Westie. Oh man, the
Yeah.
good old days.
Yeah, back when beer was fun. No,
But
it's-
it's interesting now that we've got the 16-ounce coming in the 4Z. That makes a big difference. You can very reasonably knock down a 16-ounce can, no problem. The
yeah.
22, especially with a lot of those big West Coast IPAs, you needed a buddy. I
Yeah.
mean, real talk, you had to have a buddy with you. If you crack open a denogonizer in that 22-ounce bottle, you
Oh,
better have a
gosh.
friend
Yeah.
either to
Yeah.
split it with or to pick you up and take you home.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like a bottle of wine. I mean, it's a real commitment.
Yeah. Yeah. No, absolutely, man. Well, so you definitely have the cred of the old West Coast style. What do you notice about these newer West Coast style IPAs that are coming out? I'm finding they're not malty like the old school,
Yeah, definitely that. I mean, yeah, it's interesting because I was just such a big fan of those big, aggressive, super like abrasively hoppy IPAs, and you think like you have to have a lot of body to back that up. Otherwise, it's just, I don't know if you guys have ever chewed on a hop cone, or
Yeah. Oh,
it's not super pleasant, and but yeah, I think just the way that the newer brewers and the newer have adapted to, I think, kind of, I guess, the taste of the time, but also probably the hops of, a lot of these hops didn't exist. Lagunitas didn't have access to Mosaic to make, or Citra to make their, or Anderson Valley. They didn't have those hops. So
That or the
Yeah, I
level
don't
of
know.
quality of hops that we have now too.
Totally. Yeah,
and,
yeah.
and
The sophistication of the
yeah,
the post harvest processing and all that stuff is
and then
really
the
advanced.
introduction of concentrated hops through cryogenics and
Exactly, the
yeah,
cryos and
Mhm.
everything. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, I find myself like one of the most common breweries that because I have slowed down a lot on just like trying random 16-ounce cans because I don't. It's just again, like I was saying in that Reddit post, it's like I'm older, I've got kids, I got like, I can't spend all weekend trying new beers every weekend. Sometimes I do,
Yeah.
but like Hen House is a brewery out of Santa Rosa and
yeah,
Petaluma that
very familiar.
I see new stuff from them and I'm like, oh, I got to give it a try. And one of the reasons is they kind of, to me, exemplify like the best of like the modern approach to West Coast IPAs where there is the malt is still there and there's still bitterness, but it's a lighter beer. It's like really crisp and really, it
Yeah,
drinks real clean. And like, it's nice, which is again, another thing about those old 22s of something like Denogonizer or it's like by the end of that bottle, if you didn't have a friend and if it was maybe summer or you were in a warm house, it's like that thing was getting a little syrupy, they were
Oh
heavy
yeah.
beers, really, like,
Yeah.
so the
Yeah.
drinkability wasn't necessarily there for, a session, like, whereas I think this new style of West Coast IPA, just how they're so clean. It's incredible. Like how, yeah, just how light they can feel when you see these are 7.5, 8% beers a lot of the time. And yeah, they're just, it's impressive in that way. Um, and I guess I can appreciate that they're showcasing these hop flavors in a way, like we were saying, like the hops didn't have as many flavors, I guess, back
Yeah.
20 years ago, 15 years ago.
Oh yeah.
So,
Well, it's interesting. I was just this last weekend having from Alvarado again their Waimea Skays, which is the Waimea hop out of New Zealand.
okay.
And one of our listeners and patron, Jared out of New Zealand, I posted it up and he was like, "Oh man, that Waimea hop is so underrated. Just so much aroma and flavor coming from it." And it's something we've talked about here before is that you go back, you go back 10 years and you look at somebody talking about this is a tropical aroma hop and you would drink the beer and you would tell yourself like, yeah, that's a little bit tropical, and it's so different from what we have today because the alpha acids are so much lower that you don't have the bitterness blocking anything, and these hops have so much more of those unique flavors. I mean, realistically, back in the day when we were all starting out, it was very limited on the flavors and aromas you had. And yeah, you really needed that, as you said, that heavy malt character to get in there and balance it. But yeah, it's a different world of even the ingredients that are available. It's really amazing. Yeah.
Totally. Yeah, it is
Yeah.
the spectrum of fruit flavors that come just from hops these days. It's like it's wild. I don't know. It really is when you think back to, yeah, like you said, 10 years ago. It's just like, wow, I wouldn't have believed you 10 years ago if you'd given me some of these beers and said like, yeah, no, it's just hops. Just hops made that flavor.
Yeah.
I would have been like, no, you added papaya juice or
Yeah.
something to this thing.
Yeah.
Like, what is this?
Well, and Nick, oh man, I'm gonna say maybe 8, 10 years ago, you were talking about being burned out on IPAs.
yes.
And that was that old style. And you're coming back around now. And I mean, talk about that, my
Well, I
brother,
mean,
and the
my
change.
come around back now was probably about like 4 years ago,
Yeah.
5 years ago. But yeah, probably back in like the early 2010s, I got burnt out, or just it was too much bitterness. Everybody, I think that was like the IBU wars, like who can
Yeah.
produce the highest IBU. And it was cool for a bit, at least for me, and then I just my taste buds took so much of a pounding that I couldn't take it anymore. I struggled to drink even a glass of, say like a denogonizer or whatever. Or even, or another example, like an Ninkasi, like their
Yeah.
Apocalypse or
Yeah.
Total Domination. It's just those names lived up to it because they just destroyed your taste buds, and like I couldn't
Yeah.
enjoy whatever I was going to eat afterwards because of so much bitterness. But I moved on to stouts for a bit, and brown ales, and then there was kind of that reemergence, and then all of a sudden I was like, oh, what's this hazy? And that's kind of when I discovered more New England. And that, I think that's around the time when hazies were actually becoming more like a orange juice style, the color, the flavors, all those tropical flavors and everything that you would get out of it. And I really enjoyed it. And then I started discovering West Coast IPAs again, where they weren't aiming for that bitterness anymore. It was all the tropical flavors.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah. And
Yeah.
I absolutely remember when, when the New England and the hazy style were first coming out. And Nick and I are member owners of a cooperative brewery called Brewing, a big cooperative. We talk about it all the time, so I won't bore you with it. But, a few years ago when the New England style was first starting to come out and be popular, I remember one of the guys on our brew crew, and I'm like, look, we need to get a red or a brown, we need to like get some of these classics. Let's get a Hefeweizen going. And he's like, look, man, there's these hazy IPAs and like, we've got to get on this. We've got to get hip to it. And I'm like, who would make a hazy IPA? What are you talking about? Like that, it sounds like you brewed it wrong. What do you mean hazy? That sounds awful. And, I wasn't hip to it. And then a couple of years later, when it's the big thing, and Nick, I think you actually probably introduced me to it. You're like, check this thing out. And blew me away. And it's an entirely different flavor experience. And as we say, the West Coast was really leading in this one style. And then they started doing it a different way. And then kind of that theme bounces back. And now we change out here. And it's just this like ever growing evolution,
Yeah.
And that collaboration and everything's just, it's beautiful. I love it. Yeah.
Yeah, the spectrum is so because you can still find these, you can find like Torpedo or something from Sierra Nevada, or Denogonizer still around.
Oh yeah.
And then you can find, these, like you said, like Great Notion. I think I haven't been to Alvarado Street in years, but they made some pretty thick, hazy, juicy, zero bitterness type of beers.
Yep.
Yes,
But then
indeed.
you also have this stuff that kind of, Hen House does it well, where the beer's hazy and it's like kind of full, like has that mouthfeel, but it's still got some bitterness. It's not like drinking juice, it's not. And Ruse is another one from Oregon, from Portland, I think, that I've had some of their hazies, and same thing. It's like, oh yeah, this is a real flavorful, but it's not heavy, they're kind of like riding that line somewhere in between, like mixing the two styles in a way that, I just think it's really, it's a good time to come back to IPAs because it's like the flavor spectrum is just insane. What really your options are, it's almost become it's almost a meaningless style in some way. You're like, okay, what kind of IPA? Like, that's cool. You like IPAs? Which one? Like, what kind?
Yeah. Very interestingly, I remember years back when my wife and I, we were down in San Diego going to school, and we had a house there. And so we were in one room and we had 3 other rooms. So we'd rent them out to students. Very quickly, we learned, hey, let's rent them out to international students. So we, furnished the rooms, and people would come from different countries and, go to school for a year, and then we'd, swap it out. And we loved international students from Germany. They were a lot of fun. We had people from all over, but we made some really great friends with some folks from Germany. And I remember back in those days, we were talking about, we'd get some beers and talking beer. And that's, back very early, I'm just being exposed to the good craft beers of the time. And they were saying like, well, in Germany, you go out, you get a ale or lager, and that's it. Like, we have ale and we have lager. And the same way that I looked at her and I was like, well, ale is like that doesn't mean anything with the number of things that come out of that. And as you said, that's almost like how it is with IPA now. It's like, well, I'll have an IPA. Like, okay, cool, man. That doesn't mean anything. Let's get more specific. Here are 15 IPAs, and they're in a spectrum. Where do you want to be?
Where nowadays you could just be like, oh, I'll have whatever lager you have on tap. And
yes,
you'll just get a lager. Like,
yeah, very simply. Well, and in fact, I've got a lager here. Monterey Beer, Alvarado Street. This is a lager that they brew quite frequently. I picked up
didn't you also get a keg of that?
Yes, I grabbed several cases of this, and I have a keg. I don't want to talk about it. I have a problem.
Well,
So
I think the trend that's most exciting to me is that we're seeing that break in lagers. I mean, like you're drinking, Nick, the Czech dark lager, which
Hell
I
yeah.
haven't seen anyone do it locally. I've had a couple examples from other places, and it's a great style of beer, and
This next
yeah,
one, it's even though it's a Kolsch, this brewery, Van Henyen, they're in Bend. That's literally all they produce
yeah,
is lagers, pilsners, Kolsch's. That's it. That's all they
yeah,
care about. And
yep,
so when my wife and I went to visit there, last month, that was the first brewery that we hit,
oh
and
yeah,
like I was in heaven. Like
yeah,
it was a great place. It's very old school, very classy little joint, velvet lined walls and all that. Yeah, but Van Henyen was a really good spot. I even brought back a Czech dark lager from them as well. I'm a huge fan of the dark lagers
yeah, me
and
too. I
brown
mean,
ales,
it's
but
probably Moonlight. Death and Taxes is definitely one of the
oh
most
yeah,
common beers in my
yeah,
fridge.
yeah.
awesome.
Death in Taxes. Who's making that?
Moonlight,
Hmm.
Moonlight. Yeah,
yeah, which
I feel like I had a Death in Taxes a little while back, but yeah, I need to grab another one.
yeah, they're doing, and I mean, Moonlight's another interesting. I don't know who owns them anymore. I don't know if they fully sold with when Lagunitas sold fully to Heineken, or if I don't know if they're
Interesting. I'll have to
a
look into
Heineken
that.
company, or yeah, I'm not. I'm actually. We've seen a lot more of their beers in cans in the last 5 years up here. We used to just get Death and Taxes and Reality Check once in a while, and now they send all kinds of interesting stuff up. All again, like kind of the lager spectrum. They're really pale lagers all the way through these, different amber lagers and some of the Czech ones that are like the just numbers, the gravity. I don't know exactly. I've brewed a few batches of beer, but I'm no expert. But yeah, they have some of those, and then all the way through to Death and Taxes, which is they call a black lager, and it's pretty dark.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Yeah, that's it's very interesting. Nick, do you remember the Russian deli up in San Jose? Did you
Yep.
ever go in there?
Yep.
Yeah, they had some all kinds of these European beers that were in there, and so that's how I got turned on to the Czech lagers and things like that, and really interesting flavor profiles that again 10 years ago you weren't finding at any of the breweries, and so yeah, those were like literally imported from Eastern Europe,
yeah,
and that was how I was getting exposed to them. And how cool is it that now we've got our breweries here that are doing it? I mean, there's as you guys have said, there are some breweries that are dedicated just to that. The Body by Beer uh, uh, podcast, they went up to, I can't remember the name of the brewery now, but they talked about that was just doing those Czech styles. That was the
Yep.
only style that they do, and it's just as you said, man. If anybody says craft beer is getting boring, like
yeah,
you're boring, man.
yeah,
Like go
exactly.
look around. Go look
Yeah,
around.
it's definitely
You know?
you. Like you're not. Yeah, there's more options than
Dare I
ever.
say,
Like
plan a trip around, discovering some beer.
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. No, 100%, man. And it's actually interesting. I read an article today that was talking about how there's been a little bit of a contraction. And, we had the Intoxicated Traveler on, and, is craft beer in trouble and things like that. And, there's always the Chicken Little, right? The sky is falling and all of that. And sometimes it's, hey, there's been a big expansion. There's a little contraction. Some people grew too big and they're starting to say, you know what, I liked it being a little bit smaller. Some of the breweries that were more about expansion than quality, some of them are falling off. Some of them, as we've seen, good breweries got bought up and then fell
Yeah.
apart. And
hmm
but we're seeing, I guess, a little bit of a leveling, and that has an effect on some of the growth in the hop market or in the hop producing market and in the specialty grains and like that, right? The hop producers have more than tripled in the past handful of years. I think the maltsters union went from like 8 maltsters to now there's like 60 something that are making these specialty
wow,
malts. And, so there's a little bit of pressure as, there's a little bit of contraction. People were growing quickly to support the industry. But one thing that I found very interesting is some of these small hop yards and malt producers were saying, Yeah, some of the bigger breweries, it's becoming a little bit difficult to keep up the orders there. People don't want the multi-year contracts, but we're making up for those losses in business with a lot of these smaller towns that are now getting their craft beer expansion because so much has been in the cities and then shortly outside the cities. And then there's a lot of these rural areas that still don't have, they're still not saturated with craft beer. And so the breweries are still opening up there, and the small ones, they want something unique, and so they're reaching out to these craft maltsters and craft hop yards and like that. And so, as you said, like it's there's new things popping up all the time. And
Yeah.
if you can't find something new and unique in craft beer, I feel like you're just not looking.
Yeah. Or you just it's okay to not like maybe you don't like care about beer then. I mean, like
Yes.
I'll find something else that you care about. Like I don't that's one of the things I mean, I kind of in that post what the thing that's tedious to me about this idea is this like I got a 8-year-old son, so my frame of reference is the Pokemonification of beer where it's like I love trying new beers, but this whole like, oh, I need to be collecting a new beer constantly and never drinking the same and it's just sort of like I don't know, like if that's what you like, you can still do it. It's going to be expensive. Yeah, exactly. I've attacked both of you, and also all
It's
of these
totally
are,
okay.
yeah,
It's
they're
totally
also all
okay.
self owns too. It's like
My
I'm
goal
not,
is to invite a whole mess load of people over, and I'm just like, have at it. I
yeah,
just want the labels. No.
yeah, exactly. I'm
And I
just here
just
for
want
the
to
same.
sip from each one.
Uh-huh.
And I feel like that's exactly the point is if that's what you want to be doing, it's more possible now than ever. And
Yeah,
if you don't, and like, and you just want to like, hey, I want to have access to good craft beer, but I can't be making the journey all the time and like that. And I just want to have good beers on hand. You can do that too. And that's, a
totally.
lot of times for me, I've got, about to be a 3-year-old and then we're having another. And so a lot of times when it's, hey, you want to grab some beers, we run over to Dust Bowl and we'll, I know what they're going to have. I'm going to drink the same things from them usually. And the reason we head over there is because I know what their food truck's going to be. It's always going to be Wedos, right? It's the permanent truck. They've got an indoor area with some of these couches and chairs and like that. And there's going to be a handful of other people with kids my daughter's age. And we all corral the kids over in that one area together.
Yeah,
And it's like I can go get good craft beer locally and it's a family environment and it's great.
totally.
You know what I mean? So
Yeah,
there's the option for everybody. Or if you want to be at home, like, you can grab decent to good beer at Costco and you
yeah.
can probably get some pretty good local stuff at your grocery store.
Yeah, almost definitely. Yeah, exactly. That's to me. I'm like, I can be at Costco grabbing stuff and see a perfectly delicious pilsner made by a great craft brewery, buy it for a great price, and then if I really want to nerd out with a beer friend, we have a brewery or a beer bar in town called Dead Reckoning. Highly recommended if you guys are ever in
Ooh,
Arcata.
great
But
name.
I can go there. Yeah, they're great. I can go there and they'll have like some just like they'll have Cantillon on tap sometimes. They'll
Yeah.
have, beers from all over the country. They've gotten
Nice.
drops of like Trillium and Bissell Brothers and these like big
Oh,
East Coast
excellent.
breweries. It's like it's a really stellar beer selection. And they got a cellar you can go get, aged all kinds of stouts. So it's like, yeah, if I really want to nerd out about beer, I can, I used to be able to walk there. We moved last year, and so now I have to drive if I want to go. But yeah, it's just like
Yeah.
that's in the same town. I can get both
Yeah.
of those options depending on what my day's like or what my goals are, and there's a bunch of stuff in between too. You
Yeah.
know, and that's I think when you were away, Travis, or maybe it was when you got back, I was complimenting Oregon's beer culture, and that's always what I thought about. What I really appreciate about Oregon is that it's just like I think you'd be hard pressed to find a place that didn't have craft beer on tap. That so a place that sells beer, you're not going to find a place where you can't get a pretty good beer.
Oh
It's
yeah.
just the norm. It's just like, yeah, there's good beer. Like you might be able to get like Miller Lite or something, maybe, but you can definitely
Yeah.
get an IPA.
You can definitely get some good craft stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I've even driving into Oregon made a stop off of I-5 and just, hey, got to grab some gas real quick, run in to use the bathroom, and it's, the little shop on the gas station and they've got 10 taps and they're filling growlers.
Yeah.
I was like, I have empty growlers in the back. Hold on a second. Like,
Yeah.
go grab them, fill up, roll into the family's house, and like, I happen to have 5 growlers full.
Yeah.
Let's go.
Growlers were definitely, I mean, they're still, a bit popular, but I feel, growlers were like the thing, like back in the day here.
Oh yeah.
Like there's still remnants of them, but you don't see as many of them. But like there's, growler stations. There's one, I don't know, 10 minutes from my house. You just walk in and they, with your growler and they just fill up with whatever you want.
Yeah.
And it's a good little spot. I love it. I just wish that there were more around.
Yeah. The growlers definitely died out a lot, it seems like.
For sure.
But
Yeah.
we actually have 2 local breweries that only package. Well, one of them will do the crowler too.
Yeah.
But now one of them is this little, he's a super tiny nano brewery, and his kind of focus is locally grown, all his ingredients locally grown as much as he can.
Wow.
And
Awesome.
he does stuff on tap, but his main business model is, he calls it CSB, a community supported brewery. And it's like he has different tiers. You pay a set amount and it's a certain amount of growler fills. And then 2 days a week he's open and you can come he has like these lockers outside his place. You can drop it off with a list of what you want and then come back and pick them up. And it's real cool.
That's
Yeah,
awesome.
it's cool what he's doing. But then even personally, I think my favorite local brewery is called Redwood Curtain.
Yeah,
And,
Redwood Curtain,
yeah,
man.
they're great
I
beer.
stopped into their tap room and then also to their brewery. We got to talk. Redwood Curtain's a cool spot, man.
Super cool. But they don't package any beer. You can't buy their cans anywhere. They have like 1 or 2 beers that they send out on tap at different places. But yeah, and they've been around. I think they just did their 12th anniversary, or maybe that's what's coming up this summer.
Wow.
And yeah, I mean, it's kind of like you said with Dust Bowl, where it's kind of like, to some extent, what they're going to have. They don't do a lot of crazy stuff, but they have a wide spread of styles. I mean, I was actually talking to a friend of mine the other day, and he was complaining about how everything's IPAs. And then I was in Redwood Curtain that day, and I was like, I got to send him a picture of this. And the tap board had 22 things on tap. 3 weren't alcoholic. 8 were IPAs. And the other like 10 or 11 were a stout, like a Irish stout and like a Vienna lager. They had a fest beer. It's just like, a little something for everybody. Nice. And like you said, they got games, they got family. You saw the big brewery. They have a lot of space indoor and people bring kids. And it's just a kind of a community space.
That's another big change from back when we were first coming up, is that having that kind of community space, which I feel like is, very traditional and common over in Europe, where it's more of a community space. I don't know so much the family friendly, but being like a community space. And then we have now embraced that and taking it up that level to where it is kind of a family space. The number of breweries I go into, and you come in with a kid and they're like, oh yeah, hey, our kids' games are over there. And they've got like board games and like all kinds of little stuff. And they're just prepared for it. And they're like, look, we want you to come in here and enjoy your time. You got a family, you don't, whatever. Everybody's welcome here.
Totally.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's part of the thing that people get salty about, who complain about where craft beer has gone, is and it's something that it did lose, is that sort of like, it did used to be like a real niche thing. And it was kind of like you could rest assured, if you went to a new brewery that opened, everybody you'd meet there would be some beer nerd, and you could really get into the weeds about beer if you wanted to. Nowadays I go to Redwood Curtain and it's like, there's fucking kids and some grandparents who are visiting. They're just ordering there's people at the bar being like, oh, what's closest to Coors Light you got? I'll take one of those. Sure, whatever.
Yeah. People, what's the least like a beer? And they're like, I've got you covered.
Yeah, exactly. This one tastes like strawberry milkshakes. Yeah,
that's it. Like we've got you. No worries. It's welcoming. It's open to everybody now. And it's, I get it. Sometimes when something you love starts to lose that exclusivity, right? It feels like you're losing something, and I get it. But it's good for the brewers, for more people to be coming in, right?
Exactly.
That's good for them.
And kind of to the theme of this talk, it's like, you can still go find these like real esoteric breweries who specialize in some obscure corner of beer, and you can go like really nerd out about, oh, this is like an old North German style from before the war, or whatever you want to do.
Well, if you want something that has a very niche audience, go to Ale Apothecary. right? Out in
Out in Bend.
out in Bend.
Oh,
I mean,
cool.
it's
All of their
all wild
wild
ferment,
ferment.
baby.
Oh, super cool.
And if you're into it, you're
Yeah.
gonna love it. And if people are not into a wild fermenter, if they haven't had one before,
Yeah, they're
don't
gonna
worry,
be like,
they'll only be there for
Yeah.
a second.
what did you just give me?
That bar stool will open quickly.
Yeah, yeah. Your people. If that's your thing, your people will be there.
Yes, yes. Oh man. Well, I know in your post you had mentioned the New England style, and then you mentioned pastry stouts, which we've talked about before. Some really unique stuff out there. What's the crazy thing that you like to grab every now and again that you're excited that we have access to now?
That's a good question. It's the one that tempts me against my better judgment is definitely the pastry stout. That's like promises me this sort of like alcoholic cake in a can or something. You're like, oh yeah. And I've definitely. I mean, I'm trying to pull back from the higher alcohol stuff and those just because like it's just like I said, I got kids. I'm getting older. It's kind of like they're too good sometimes. It doesn't. You don't kind of. Yeah, I don't know. You don't have that message to your brain.
I love them, but diabetes says otherwise.
Yeah, exactly. It's like,
and I feel like 90% of the stouts out there are like pastry stouts now. There's very little traditional stouts.
Yeah, they're getting harder to find. Old Rasputin has been making a strong comeback in my fridge for sure from North Coast.
That is a classic. That is such a classic, man. It's so funny that we could talk beers all day and we'd all just be like, oh yeah, I remember that one. Oh yeah, that one was important in my development, and I'm so used to talking to people from the West Coast, especially with experience around the Northern California, Southern Oregon area, that I forget. And I think everybody's got these ones, and I'm like, oh yeah, you know about Old Rasputin. And people are like, I don't know what you're talking about.
What are you talking about?
You know about Brother Thelonious? They're like, no, Downtown Brown? No. I'm like, oh, get out of here. Yeah. You don't know beer, man.
Yeah, I know. I do. I think we are in a bit of a bubble on the West Coast in general, and especially the sort of like Portland to San Francisco Bay Area range where it's just like, like in Humboldt County, we've got the Mad River opened in like 1987 or 88. Six Rivers is like 93. Eel River, I think, is like 93. Lost Coast is like 95. It's like, and then it's like this has been here for a long time. But I grew up in the Midwest. And like I said, my family kind of was split between Michigan and Wisconsin. And I mean, I was lucky, I guess, in the sense that like my family, they were into beer at the time. Like they would, my dad would drink a lot of like Bell's, and we would have a couple of local breweries Michigan Brewing Company and stuff that don't exist anymore. But he tried his hand at home brewing, and then my aunt and uncle in Wisconsin would home brew, and they were big. They always had like German imports when we'd go visit them. And so they were all like into beer. But speaking of the pastry stouts, actually, I remember 4 or 5 Christmases ago, I picked up I can't remember the name of the beer, but it was from Modern Times down in San Diego, and it was one of their big stouts with chocolate and vanilla and something. Yeah. And I grabbed one of those. I was like, oh, I'll spring this on the old folks, because I know they're not keeping up on the trends. And I poured everybody little like 2-ounce pours, and it was really funny to see their reaction, because they were kind of like, this is beer? Like, what is this? Like,
it's dessert.
Yeah, exactly. My one uncle, he was like, I don't really drink barrel or spirit aged stouts because they always taste so boozy. But he's like, this one's good. I was like, yeah, watch out, uncle.
That's right.
Get deep into those because they are good. But that sucker's
wait till
like
they try those milk stouts.
Oh yeah.
Those go down too easy.
Easy.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, well, and it's funny. I'm into everything, right? I mean, even if it's a beer style that's not my favorite, I'm perfectly happy to take a pour of it, spend some time
barley
with
wine now.
get into it, learn it. Barley wines now, I for a long time I was a naysayer on the barley wines, right? I said, look, if you want something that tastes like that and just gets you messed up, you just get some Robitussin.
It sound like it was nothing. Robocop couldn't stop me from puking and flushing. No balls to be busting, no fighting, no cussing. This love for a drug called Robitussin.
Right, I mean they sell it everywhere. and that was my go-to, just to poke a little, a little jab. But they're good. We had I don't know
Was it
how many.
else?
Like we had like 100 of them out in Southern Cal or South
Up in work.
Carolina.
Yeah. There was
Yeah.
quite a few that we tried there. But then before that, even in December when you came up here and
Yeah.
we went out to Ale Song, and you got
Oh,
to
yeah.
try. Yeah.
That's right. Some
so
very good ones from Ale Song, and
You had your world
yeah. So
changed.
I've gotten to really
Converted you.
expand my horizon, but and that's it. I think there are a lot of people, and this is fine too. You'd be this person. There are a lot of people who are like, oh, I don't know what to get. Recommend me something, and then they're like, I don't really like this. And then they're unhappy about it, which is fine. But just know what your parameters are, so you can share with your beer tender,
Yeah, exactly.
and they'll help you out.
What kind of flavors do you like?
That's it. And what don't you like, right?
Yeah.
But I, very open. And I was over at, oh man, what is it? Not Promise. Settle Down, right? I was over
nice.
at Settle
Good
Down
spot.
Brewing. And, it was kind of a busy weekend. So this was my own fault. We came in and I said, I'll take your recommendation. She's like, well, what do you like? I was like, I like everything. I just, you recommend me, all the beers. And she was like, no, like it doesn't work that way. I was like, all right, well, if you were ordering, what would you pour yourself? And she was real reluctant, real hesitant, but then finally poured me this beer. And she's like, look, I like weird stuff. Okay. So that's what this is going to be. So
You
I was
asked
like,
for
look,
it.
I'm not going to send it back. I'm going to pay for it either way, So, but I was really glad she poured it for me. It was that, I can't remember what the name is. It's something like Flying Fat Elvis or something like that.
Oh,
And
the
it's
banana peanut butter one?
the banana peanut butter sour. And
Whoa.
it was like,
Yeah.
like if you walked in and somebody's like, listen, I'm going to get you a banana peanut butter sour beer, you'd be like, I don't know.
I don't think so.
Probably
No.
good.
Like it's maybe after
You
4
get
or
your
5.
stuff for yourself.
Yeah.
But it was really, really good. And had I not just been like, look, I don't care how crazy it is, pour it for me. Let's see what happens. I would have never picked it for myself. And it was really good. It was out there and crazy. It's not for everyone. I guarantee you that. It's
Yeah.
not for most people. But I liked it. And it was fun. And if we weren't in this current age of craft beer, nobody would have made that. Or they would have made it and somebody would have tasted it and said, you have to pour this out. You can't
this is
sell
going
this.
down the drain. Yeah, exactly. It's never going on tap.
Yeah, that's not going to work out at all. No.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I feel like experimentation is more open than ever. I mean, I think as a small brewery, especially that, doesn't have probably, investors who are so fixated on just the quarterly reports. It's like people will try stuff and you've got latitude to play. And, like obviously you got to make some beer that people like a lot and drink regularly if you want to stay in business. But
Yeah.
if you're doing that, there's a lot of room to play around and try one-offs and make weird flavors and challenge people. Say, hey, yeah, this is going to sound weird. You think you'd give it a shot?
Well, and the very thing that a lot of people complain about. I walk in, they've got 12 taps and 9 of them are IPAs. Hey, man, IPAs pay the bills so that they can make those other 3 that you and your buddy are the only ones who drink, right?
Yeah,
Like,
exactly.
so those IPAs are what are allowing them to make you that beer you like, which, hey, I'm fine with it, man.
Yeah, it's a business after all. I had an interesting conversation with a friend of mine the other day who we were kind of talking about the IPA, just everything. And he brought up, he was saying he had been to Europe this summer and he was saying, he was like, in Europe, like every country kind of has their own flavor. Like when you're in Czechia, like, yeah, they've got all these different styles, but like everybody drinks Pilsner, and if you're in these certain parts of Germany, it's Pilsner or it might be Helles, or, if you're in England, it's like, yeah, they got all these different styles, but really like if you just ask for a beer at the bar, you're getting a mild ale, a bitter or a mild,
Yeah.
So he's saying like, well, maybe just the hoppy pale ales, that's our American style. Like that's the standard. And like, sure, there's other stuff, but like, that's our palate. That's what we like in this country, and
Yeah.
I mean, it makes sense. I come from like the agriculture world. So to me, I always really appreciate that like modern hops are kind of our invention. We created that stuff. We took it in this crazy direction we were talking about earlier and really like kind of stepped the game up. So like, it makes sense to me that it would be what we appreciate in beer. Obviously something about those flavors we've been chasing for 20 years.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's a very excellent point. Yeah, realistically, the hop has been relegated to, providing bitterness to balance the sweetness of the malt, and that's been
Hmm.
its job, right? I mean, as a preservative, certainly, but after the initial "this is here to preserve and provide longevity," it started coming in as, okay, well, how much do we use is based on its need for the balancing act. Um, and yeah, realistically, the American style IPA is the first time that we said, no, that's not it at all. We're showcasing the hop. This is
Yeah.
about the hop character. So yeah, that's a very interesting take. It's our invention, our style. So why wouldn't it be the standard that we have, that this is the American beer you find? And we have some other variations as well, but this is this is
Yeah.
the basic what everyone has. Yeah,
Yeah.
that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, he was kind of like, he was like, you wouldn't go to Prague and be like, oh, you jackasses are just drinking Pilsner. Like, you're boring, It's like, us. I don't know, dude. Maybe catch up on a history lesson a little bit before you go off. Like,
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so as the everyman, right? As a just a regular guy who's out there enjoying beers, drinking what you like. What do you find, what are you looking forward to in the future of beer?
uh, honestly, I think the malt situation is going to be the next. I think, people bringing back old varieties and making new varieties. And I think, maybe there will be some new technologies in the way they make malt that will change what's available. Like, I don't know. I think about, like, I have a buddy who owns a coffee roaster, and he's been over the last couple of years kind of sharing some of these crazy modern coffees with me, and some of them are insane. Taste like, he had one a year, like last Christmas, I think, that tasted like blueberry muffins. Like, it was so weird. And
I
I was
just
asking, I
had
was
one
like,
recently that was like that.
it's wild. And so he's
Yeah.
telling me, like, oh, so what happened is they used to just wash the coffee, they'd soak it for 3 days or whatever, then wash it off. And he said some people started experimenting, and now people are like fermenting the fresh coffee, and like they use it, put it under pressure. And he said they're literally using brewing equipment. So I imagine, maybe they come up with something like that for
Wow.
malt that starts to pull out these crazy different flavors. And I just don't, it's not my world, but even just just the resuscitating old varieties of malt, and kind of that kind of thing. I think, there's just a lot of room there to play with. Like, it seems like, yeah, that's sort of an ingredient that hasn't been messed with very much. And
Yeah.
yeah, I think just in that, kind of coinciding with that expansion of lager styles being available, and kind of some of these more like traditional, more mellow European ales, it's like the malt situation. I imagine we'll see some really interesting stuff there. And yeah, I don't know. I mean, I guess part of the reason I'm a bit of a curmudgeon about people complaining is I'm just like, man, I don't know. I hope it just keeps. I hope it doesn't collapse, because this is great what we have going on right now. Like, if it
Yeah.
doesn't change at all from this point, like, oh, that'd be a bummer, I guess. But like, a lot worse things could happen.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. No,
but
absolutely. That definitely is an area for, more research and expansion. And that is really interesting that you talk about the coffee aspect and like that. And, Nick and I, we get into, the beer, of course, but we also get into food and new creative things with that. And coffee is something
Coffee.
that we're getting more into, but it's, yeah, all of these kind of
well, that you say
craft
food,
artisan
and that
things.
actually reminds me of something that I kind of had forgotten about. But there's a brewery, I think they just contract brew in the Bay Area, called Dokai Beer,
I
and
don't know
he's
them.
so
Oh,
they it's so we had a brewery up in Eureka that was an offshoot of a South Korean brewery, and they bought the old Lost Coast facility and started brewing. And it was real weird, and the whole explanation was that they were buying American hops and barley, and they calculated it would be cheaper to brew the beer on the West Coast and ship it to them. But they were selling beer locally, and they had some interesting stuff because, they're the owners and brewers were Korean, so they have just a different flavor palette. They did some cool
Yeah.
stuff with like lemongrass and some different fruits and stuff. Um,
kimchi.
yeah, they did have a kimchi sour actually,
Really?
and it was,
There you go.
again, like
Oh,
like you said, it was not for
nice.
everybody,
Yeah.
not an everyday drinker, but cool and interesting. And so anyway, they shut down, and then this guy opened. He worked for them up here, And then he opened this contract brewed place called Dokai Beer in the Bay somewhere. And it's really similar. It's Korean inspired beers. And he was starting up right before COVID. And his goal was to have a Korean and like Southeast Asian restaurant, and the beers were brewed to pair with those flavors. And then the restaurant thing hasn't taken off from what I understand it, the COVID interrupted stuff. But he's still on the shelves up here. And it's just, I think that kind of is another thing that's really interesting to me, is seeing as the exposure of people from like not traditional beer countries get exposed to beer and get exposed. It's like, what's somebody whose culinary background is, from Lebanon, like what kind of flavors are they going to bring into a beer? What are they good? What kind of flavors, what spices are they aware of that you and I have never heard of, And so that's, I think, just kind of that like real, like globalization of the palate available to brewers, because ultimately it has been, a Northern and Eastern European pursuit for the most part. So it's like we have, those cultures have certain flavors that they like and work with. And so, I think that's a really exciting thing in the future, is just, seeing some of these people who come from a totally different culinary background and have a different sense of what flavors can go together and awareness of these different ingredients. And I think we'll see some really cool stuff coming out of that.
Yeah, that's really interesting as well, and especially talking about when you mention but maybe Lebanon, see what's coming out. That goes back into with the grains also, right? And it's what are grains that are common in different non-traditional beer countries? What are grains that are common there that somebody's going to say, hey, I'm going to malt this and let's make a beer out of it. Let's see what happens, So that, who knows, that could be some really interesting stuff. And I wouldn't be surprised if we see it in the next 5-10 years. Yeah,
absolutely. I think it's probably already happening. I'm sure if you go to a place like New York, I mean, like I said, the Dokai beer is based out of the Bay Area somewhere. I think you go to these super diverse cities and you're going to find, these people who are probably just small breweries at this point, because it seems like the big breweries are just sort of hanging on tight, because I think it is probably rough if you're Sierra Nevada or Dogfish Head or one of these big people who had it's like, you gotta sell a lot of beer to keep your lights on, so you gotta have mass appeal to make that kind of scale work. But I'd imagine it's starting up, and I think we will see probably some kind of like flavor combinations kind of burst out of these little pockets and kind of get into the more mainstream of beer.
Absolutely.
Well, I can't wait to see what's next. 100%. There's so many possibilities, and each time we venture down a new path, I'm always just blown away. Like, I would have never even thought to go this direction.
Yeah, exactly.
And so I know whatever it's going to be, it's going to pop out. We're going to be like, I would have never thought to go this direction.
It's like you said with the hazy IPA. It's like, what, brew the beer wrong? Like, no, we're not doing that, And then like, it seems like it kind of worked out. Like,
yeah, exactly. Well, Nick, what do you got? Do you have any final words, final questions?
No, I think you nailed it all.
Steve,
cool.
Anything you want to say to our listeners? Anything that they need to hear? Wisdom that you must bring forth to our listeners?
I think keeping with the theme of it, it's, just enjoy beer the way you enjoy it, and remember not to forget how good we have it right now. And if it's really boring to you and not interesting, then it's okay. You don't have to drink beer. It is okay. Life without beer, I heard it's fine. People tell me.
I heard it's fine.
At least awesome. It goes on anyway. I know that much. But
I've been told. I don't know much about it, but I've been told.
According to the internet, it's doable. But seriously, I just think, like, I don't know. Hobbies shouldn't be chores. Like, if you enjoy it the way you enjoy it, and don't worry about the other ways people enjoy it, I guess.
Yeah.
Because it is it's a beautiful time to be a beer enjoyer in the United States, for sure.
Yeah. Absolutely it is. Yeah. Absolutely it is, and well said. And, usually when we wrap up, we always remind our listeners to always say yes to the Hoppy ending. And since you are our guest, we will give you the honors to let the audience know.
All right. Well, don't forget to always say yes to the Hoppy ending.
Cheers.
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 The preceding podcast was produced by Sequoia Productions, LLC. Copyright 2022. All rights reserved. If you enjoyed this show and you're looking for more, or even if you're looking for something a little different, check out the other amazing shows by Sequoia Productions, wherever you get your podcasts, or on sequoia.com.
Hoppy trails to brew until we drink again. Hoppy trails to brew. Keep sharing with your friends. Who cares about which IPA tastes better? ABV are just a couple letters. Hoppy trails to brews until we drink again.
Thank
Awesome.
you guys.
That was rad.
Excellent. That was very
And-
good. That was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I enjoyed that. That was
Almost
super fun.
exactly 60 minutes. So I'm going to stop it here.